Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I'm here with my colleague Martin Penny. So I work for EIT Raw Materials. I'm actually in charge of the education portfolio in France, Germany, Switzerland, and a part of Portugal. Martin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Martin Penny. I work in the Executive Agency for the European Research Council, where I head the unit dealing with physical sciences and engineering.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like to start by stating a few words on the objective of this session. The objective of this session is to highlight and promote the work of talented scientists, and is devoted to create excitement for science and technology by giving the floor to 3 brilliant young scientists who have been awarded the European Research Council Starting Grant. With ERC grants, the European Union is leveraging talent and curiosity of some of the best young scientists in Europe. ERC grants do empower scientists to dream the future. Their ideas have been selected for a number of reasons, of course, but they do demonstrate the possibility to break new ground and open new ways to deal with challenges in many fields. Today, we're selecting one particular field. Our speakers will talk about their research in the field of material science and technology. Europe's ambition to effectively tackle current and future crises depends on the willingness to support top researchers like they are at the frontiers of knowledge. After the 3 presentations, Martin will tell us about ERC grant schemes and the application and evaluation procedure. Then we'll have a panel session with all of us, and where we will address well, the importance and the relevance of the work of our 3 researchers, and also we'll talk a little bit about their careers and motivations. Finally, there will be time for questions and answers. Now, I'd like to start with a poll. If the control room is willing to give me the opportunity of sending out the poll, the idea is that we would like to know a little bit more about the audience that we have right now in front of us, and basically what the question that we are asking is, please let us know what is your current occupation. So you will see at some point, well, I guess some options where you can take if you are a pupil, a student, a PhD candidate, a researcher, a representative of the private sector, etc. Can we make that work? Control room, please. I can't hear what you're saying. Is the control room trying to communicate with me? Okay, so apparently the polling question is active. I don't see it, but it is active. I want to see the results right now. I see that the results are coming in. Perhaps I will give it a few seconds so that this is it's being actualized, it's being refreshed as we speak. We have at the moment 30% of policymakers. This is the highest score. And then it's followed by industry representative, journalists, 18%, scientists, 18%. That's right. And PhD students and postdocs, 10%. All right, that's very interesting. Thank you so much for having participated to this. And then, without further ado, let's introduce our first speaker, Ioannis Papakonstantinou from the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineer of University College London. He's going to talk about his projects, interglazing, that's intelligent functional glazing for self-cleaning properties to improve energy efficiency of the built environment. Thank you, Ioannis. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Serge, and thank you very much, Martin. I can't see my slides. If someone can put them up, please. I would like to welcome everyone to my talk, and I would also like to start with an apology, because we were notified just a few minutes ago that the videos that we were supposed to be playing, you won't be able to see them, and that was a big part of my presentation. Regardless, the topic of my talk today is nanotechnology, how to use nanoscale technologies to improve the energy efficiency of buildings. And why is this important? Well, this is important because actually even before COVID, people used to spend the majority of their time indoors. And as a consequence, the built environment as a sector was one of the biggest consumers of energy, as well as one of the worst offenders as far as CO2 emissions is concerned. And of course, this situation was exacerbated. Oh, not even the animation is working. It was exacerbated, even more by the fact that the building stock in Europe and everywhere in the world, as a matter of fact, is quite inefficient as far as energy is concerned. To give you an example, 60% of our energy is typically leaking through our windows. So if we were to conform with the mandate of the Green Deal and reach carbon neutrality, then there was a recent study that concluded that about 90% of the building stock, at least in the EU, needs to undergo some type of upgrade or so. And in fact, this needs to happen at a time of exploding demand for energy-intensive processes, one example of which is cooling. What we are proposing and what we think the best pathway forward is by really going down to the nanoscale, because this is where you can augment and amplify the properties of materials and even induce new type of properties that native materials do not even possess. And of course, before you start exploring things at such small scales, one needs to start by fabricating them. And my group is quite proficient in a number of fabrication processes, as I will explain in the next slide, but pretty much we're covering anything from maybe 50 nanometers all the way to millimeter or even centimeter scales. And in many occasions, applications demand that we start kind of mixing something that is nanometers with centimeters. So we need to bridge maybe 3 or 4, even 5 orders of magnitude in terms of dimensions. And of course, there's no such a thing as one solution fit for all. So we had to embark on and explore and advanced knowledge in a number of fabrication processes. To give you an example, in the sub-100 nanometer regime, we work with blocopolymer self-assembly. Between 100 nanometers and micron, we have a large range of processes. Most recently, we have settled to kind of laser-depending manufacturing or hydrothermal synthesis of nanoparticles, or depositing thin films with salt gel methods or chemical vapor deposition. And for larger scales, we usually use imprinting, as well as direct laser writing. Two-photon polymerization is one example. And this is a library of structures that we have made in my group. Particularly in this talk, I will focus on a very special class of nanostructures based on nanocones. And you can see starting from the top left and moving clockwise, some regular cones, truncated cones, some very sharp nanocones, and even some cones that have some cap. We call them reentrant structures. And these are really bio-inspired structures that can induce multifunctionality. Multifunctionality is very important. It's a word that you will hear from me quite a lot in this presentation. And so you can see, for example, the wings of butterflies or cicadas, or even the isomoths having this type of nanostructures, and they can do a lot of things with them. We also make porous structures, and you can see two examples on the second row of high and low porosity for catalysis, for example, application. Next, you have some resonant discs, maybe single, double, even triple. And for that, we can make very efficient sensors like surface enhanced Raman scattering or so. And we can make even more complex structures, some binary structures, as you can see on the bottom row. Moving on, I will start with an example. Again, there is no animation in my slides. This isn't what was supposed to happen. So we replicated these nanocones. They're about 100 nanometers in pitch, just to give you an idea of the dimensions. And we put them in silicon. And silicon is a very important material because the 90% of solar cells are made of silicon. And you can see two wafers, one without and one with our nanostructures. It's the second at the bottom on the left-hand side. And first of all, you can observe the difference in reflectance. And in fact, we measured the reflectance of the two. And for the bare silicon, you can see that reflectance is about 30 or 40% across the solar spectrum. This is completely wasted. Whereas if you start decorating this with our nanostructures, then you kind of induce a gradient refractive index. So you don't have abrupt changes to the refractive index at the interface, which is the reason why light reflects. And you very efficiently suppress reflectance down to even less than 3%. So your energy budget in a silicon solar cell can improve by 30 or 40%, which is very substantial. At the same time, these nanocones are well known to create air pockets. Air is trapped within these nanocones and kind of create some tiny springs. And if you have some sort of fluid, maybe a water droplet impinging onto the substrate, then these tiny springs push it back, and you can have the famous superhydrophobic effect. Let's see what my next slide will look like. So there you had a video, which you could see water droplets bouncing off away from the substrate and actually cleaning the substrate in a very efficient way. So going back to the multifunctionality, and on the left side, what you would have seen is the water staining the silicon wafer because native silicon is hydrophilic. And this is now an example of how you can actually modify the properties and starting from something that was hydrophilic to make it completely superhydrophobic and induce a self-cleaning effect. So at the same time, we gave some of the substrate to some colleagues in France at CNRS, Professor David Quer's group and his PhD student David. And they started cooling down these substrates and the nanocones. And we were observing condensation. So you see some environmental scanning electron microscope images there. And the first thing to notice is that the water, as it condenses, rather than forming a continuous film, it condenses this quasi-spherical state. It is very loosely attached to the substrate. And I was having some videos of the breath figures, and what you would see there is actually the water starts nucleating at the bottom of these nanocones, then starts Laplace pressure, makes it elevate towards the top of the substrate, and then there, a lot of these water droplets that condensate meet each other, and as they meet, they jump away from the substrate, and we can have a very efficient anti-condensation effect. In many cases, over 3 hours, we have measured over 90% prevention of condensation on these substrates. In the interest of time, I would like to skip the next slide and talk a little bit about glass. So apart from silicon, we work with glass as well as most popular industrial polymers. And there was a lot of interest in automotive as well as personal consumer electronic industries for anti-reflective glass that stops glare as well as self-cleaning. So we made a method which we call self-regenerative soft lithography, and we considerably simplified nanostructure of glass, which is extremely difficult as a matter of fact. And we decorate the glass with these structures, and we found that you can increase transmission to about 98 or 99% for a large range of angles up to 70 degrees or so, while at the same time maintaining the superhydrophobic effect. So you can have, for example, anti-sticking surfaces that you cannot stain with your fingerprints. Of course, these are very popular for mobile phone screens and so on. And the last slide, at the same time, we have observed very strong antibacterial effect. And this is attributed to the mechanical rupturing of bacteria. And in fact, it's the first time that it's reported in glass. And we did it with gram-positive bacteria, Staphylococcus in this case. It's really nasty and very hard to kill. So you can start, putting the structures in high-touch surfaces. So I guess I will conclude my talk at this point. I would like to thank everyone for their attention and my group for these results and their work. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was muted, sorry. Thank you so much, I was saying, Ioannis. This is fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you during the panel discussion. So many applications come to mind. This is great. Our second speaker now is Ana Borrás. Ana is working in the Institute of Material Science in Seville, in Spain, and it's located at the University of Seville, and she's working for the Spanish National Research Council that's called CSIC. Her project is called 3D Scavengers. It's about nanoscale architectures to improve energy scavenging. Anna, the floor is yours.
Yes, I see now my presentation. So thank you very much for this kind presentation. And it is my pleasure to present today the main ideas behind 3D scavengers. But first, I want to share with you something that I have learned in the procedure to become an ERC grantee. And is that most of the ERC projects deal with a global framework. And usually there is a list, one big problem with at least one solution. And you have to ask yourself, what can you do with your skills, backgrounds, and resources to solve this problem? And of course, what do you want to do? And in my case, I'm very happy to work every day with vacuum and plasma synthesis of 1D and 3-dimensional nanostructures. And I want to tell you today why, if I have access to so many reactors, I want to use only one. And this begins, sorry for the format, with one question. Who in the audience doesn't have a cell phone? And I know the answer. The answer is that everybody has a cell phone. And most of you surely also owns a smartwatch. But this is only the beginning. In the near future, we will be surrounded by a multitude of smart devices to bring us more security in our houses, cars, and cities, to be used as medical sensors and actuators, and of course, to keep us connected. These devices will be small in size, but also in power consumption. And we want them to be working in a remote way. The technology is almost available. The problem here is how are we powering them? It is not only that we don't want to take the risk, the environmental risk of the use of batteries, it is impossible to recharge or replace the batteries to billions of devices. So we need to power them using the local energy that they have available in their surroundings. Good news are that we have already accessible at laboratory scale the perovskite solar cells, piezoelectric and triboelectric nanogenerators to harvest from movements and sound and mechanical deformation, pyroelectric and thermoelectric nanogenerators to harvest from temperature fluctuations and gradients, and also rectennas to harvest from electromagnetic waves. But the problem is that these environmental energy sources are not always available, or they are random or unstable. So we need to go a step forward and develop multi-source energy scavengers. There are two main trends in the state of the art. The hybrid structural approach, that is to stack several single source energy harvesters in one architecture, and also the multifunctional approach, which profits from the multifunctional character of materials like piezoelectric semiconductors and ferroelectrics. The situation, however, is that any of them have solved so far the main challenges in the topic, as going beyond the level of milliwatt per square centimeter, to have a stable and long lifetime devices, and to produce these devices by a sustainable approach. So my project, 3D Scavengers, sorry for the format, it's a pity. This project aims to give an all-in-one solution to the multi-source energy scavenging by combining both the multifunctional and hybrid approaches in a smart combination of shells within one wire. In this way, I will deliver the highest integration level for multi-source energy harvesters, combining active, passive, multifunctional, and protective coatings in one wire, and having a very high density of these wires supported on rigid and flexible substrates. And I will also take the risk to include a perovskite solar cell in this system. I didn't say before, but the ERC projects are high-risk, high-gain projects. And in my case, to have a perovskite solar cell embedded between a pyroelectric and a piezoelectric nanogenerator is really a strong risk. And I will produce all the shells using only one reactor, a plasma and vacuum reactor, to minimize the cost, to minimize the time consumption, also to simplify the operation, because usually even for the people in the academics, when they are out of this topic, they are a little bit scared of using vacuum and plasma. But they are solventless and low temperature methods, so we need to include them in our synthesis. They are industrially scalable, and I hope to develop new hybrid vacuum and plasma methods with this one reactor. Which are the challenges? So we need to design a high throughput combination of techniques for the final device. We need conformal growth. We need to align these nanowires, and of course, this must be compatible with big areas and roll-to-roll. And the breakthroughs is that we are going to preserve the interfaces, and this is very important when you are talking about materials like hybrid perovskites and zinc oxide. We will have highly reproducible materials and devices, and of course, we will develop novel materials. This will be a sustainable and environmental friendly process to create durable and efficient nano devices. And this is possible because I have the background to produce this. So I have been working with solar energy, solar harvesters. I have protected this energy harvester, and I have been even working with perovskite solar cells underwater. And I have demonstrated that the one nano device on one wire is applicable to the piezoelectric nanogenerators. These are some of the materials that I have developed so far: metal shells, metal oxide shells, organic nanomaterials, and I'm able to put them in a multi-shell nanowire. This is one example of a piezoelectric nanogenerator in one wire. You will need at least 4 different vacuum or plasma reactors to create this nanowire, but we are going to do this only with one. And this is maybe one of the few examples in the literature about a very small perovskite solar cell. So you can see here how we have the transparent conducting oxide, the titanium dioxide, the perovskite photovoltaic shell, and the spirometad to close the nano device. So don't forget that we can fabricate them in a very high density and also in the 3 dimension of the scale of the space. In this case, that is a multi-stack of nanotrees. So at the end, in 5 years, I hope to be able to develop environmental energy harvester to use the photovoltaic, piezoelectric, and pyroelectric effects to recover the energy from the lights in your office, the random movement that I'm doing, or from the small change in temperature when you breathe or you go out for a walk. these are our very first results. It's a pity that the video is not working. When you are tapping on this hybrid piezo and triple electric nanogenerator, we can switch on a LED, an LED, and if we combine this with a small capacitor, as you will see in the next presentation shortly, we can deliver the power to switch on a bigger array of LEDs. Sorry, the video is not working. This is a strong multidisciplinary method. Another big thing about the ERC is that we can go from this very small group working in multi-source and EGA scavengers 1 year ago to this motivated and large group that I expect to have working for the 1st of November. And just some final remarks. I think it's really worthy to invest the time in this kind of projects and idea. We need to stay go on with the research on multifunctional materials. From my point of view, they are really the hardware for the new technologies, but we need to produce this material in sustainable ways using environmentally friendly and scalable approaches. And thank you very much for this kind invitation. One video is working. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you very much to the ERC.
Thank you, Anna. That was great. Despite the technical problems, we got it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker is Céline Merlet. She works in a lab in the southwest of France called CIRIMAT. Her employer is the French National Center for Scientific Research, that's called CNRS. And she's going to tell us about her project, Superpowers, and it's about the systematic multi-scale simulations to study supercapacitors. Céline, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to present my research in this setting, even if unfortunately it has to be online. So the project I'm going to talk about is Superpowers, Structure Performance Relationships in Porous Carbons for Energy Storage. So I know that if you're not in the field, this title doesn't say much probably. So I'm going to try to explain in a few minutes what we do. So I guess I don't have to explain the importance of energy storage to this audience, especially after the talk we just saw. So you can need energy storage, which is what we call grid storage or large-scale storage to store the electricity produced through renewable energy sources, such as solar and wind, but you also need it for transportation or portable devices, as we just heard. And if you have a mobile phone or if you have heard about electric cars, the system that you always think about in the first place is batteries, because they are used in many systems already. And if you have a mobile phone, you know that they are quite nice because you can charge your phone and then you can use it for a few days before charging it again. Well, at least at the beginning, right? Because we all know that at some point the battery decays and then the charge lasts for less long. So batteries are nice because you can store quite a decent amount of energy, but they have a few problems, and so they can't be used for every application. So the systems that I'm working on, which are called supercapacitors, actually their main drawback is that they can store less energy, but their very good advantage is that they can be charged very fast in a few seconds, and they can be cycled many times, like millions of cycles. So because of that, they're used in applications where you need exactly that. So for example, you can put them on the roof of a bus, and then each time the bus breaks, which happens very often in a city, you charge the supercapacitors and then you reuse the energy that you've stored to accelerate. And by doing that, you can actually save up to 30% of fuel, which is far from being negligible. The same type of system using the regenerative energy braking, it's also what's used in start and stop systems, for example. And you can also put supercapacitors with cranes. So in this case, the idea is that you store energy when you lower the loads and you use it again when you lift the loads. And when you do that, again, you can save up to 30% of energy. and more off-fuel elements. So more recently, buses and even small trains using only supercapacitors have been built. So in this case, the idea is that you have charging station at each stop, and then because they can be charged fast, you can charge them while passengers are going in and out, and you can have enough energy to go to the next stop. So this is what's happening at the moment. So in short, supercapacitors are already used, as you can see, but they would be more used, and also they could help to save more fuel or more energy if they could store more energy. So can we store more energy without losing the ability to do 1 million cycles of charge-discharge? This is what I'm working on. So to be able to answer this question, we need to understand how they work. So this is what they look like on the left. So this is a small supercapacitor. This is like a cylindrical small battery in a way.
I think we lost you, Celine. Is there a technical problem there? Yeah, it's the control room tells me that's a problem of a connection at Celine's side. Can we continue then? Yes? Oh, she's completely disconnected. Okay, so I'm very sorry for this. Let's go on and let's have Martin Penny tell us everything about ERC grants in a few minutes, which is quite a challenge, but I think you can do it.
Sure. Well, I hope we can get Celine to join us again, because I think it would be great to hear her talk in full. I hope that you've heard two of our researchers, and hopefully we'll hear all of Celine's talk later. But I hope it's inspired you to.
She's back.
I hope it has inspired you to and given you lots of food for thought. And those of you in the audience who are PhD students and postdocs are probably wondering, how could you get the type of funding which would allow you to develop such an interesting research program in the same way that that Ioannis, Celine, and Anna have done. So I just want to say in a few minutes a few words about the European Research Council. So I don't know if you can put my slides on screen. Unfortunately, I don't see them at present. There we go. So I just want to talk about the way in which the ERC works. So the ERC encourages high quality research and supports researchers of all nationalities in any field with one selection criterion. We select the projects on the excellence of their science. It's designed to be the simplest funding scheme around. The reason why it's designed in that way is it's designed by researchers for researchers. So all of the decisions are made by what we call the Scientific Council. They are 21 prominent researchers who are proposed by an independent identification committee, and they set out the overall strategy. They decide what type of projects are funded, how they are funded, what the evaluation criteria, what the procedures are. I work within the ERC executive agency, and essentially we put all of the ideas and the approach of the Scientific Council into action. So we launch the calls for proposals, we manage the peer review process, and we put everything in place. So the Scientific Council is led by Professor Jean-Pierre Bourguignon and works together. I'll give you the names of the 3 vice presidents, but you see all of the people here in the Scientific Council on screen. So works alongside Professor Janet Thornton, Professor Evelyn Krohn, and Professor Fabio Zuiano, who are the 3 vice presidents. You see there are the others here. Why am I telling you this? Because I think the key thing is that all of you who are researchers in this audience right now are able to apply. Any researcher from any nationality, anywhere in the world can apply for our funding in any subject. It's completely bottom up. Any field of research, there are no priorities, there are no preferred areas. What we ask for is what Anna said, high risk, high gain projects which really could change the future of science, the future of research, our lives, our worlds, our environments, our futures. So The idea is these projects are submitted and selected purely on the basis of their excellence of the researcher and the excellence of the research idea, with the idea of giving longer-term grants, fairly substantial funding, so that people, the researchers who win them, can really make a difference in advancing research in their areas. The majority of the funding is targeted at young researchers, which is very much the focus of our session here today. So 2/3 of the money go to what we call starting grantees, and we've heard from 3 starting grantees today, and also to consolidator grantees. So there are separate competitions, if you will, for people who are at the starting grant range. That's people who are between 2 to 7 years after their PhD, and they can apply up to €1.5 million of funding for a project of over 5 years. There is a separate competition for those who are a little bit more established in their career, 7 to 12 years after their PhD. And again, they can apply for funding for up to 5 years for over up to €2 million. Other researchers who are more advanced researchers with a significant track record of research achievements, again, it's a separate competition and up to €2.5 million of funding over 5 years. There are other types of funding available from the ERC. I won't go through those in any more detail, but I just wanted to make sure that the audience was aware that this isn't something which is just only open to select researchers. All of you are in a position to be able to apply. I'll just finish with some information on information sources. And of course, there is a question and answer session. So if people have questions on ERC, as well as on the wonderful research that you've heard about this morning, I'd be happy to take questions at that point as well. So thank you, Serge. That's the end of my talk, and back over to you.
Thank you, Martin. So yes, Celine, are you ready to take over?
Yes. I apologize. I really don't know what happened because my connection seems stable. So
these things happen.
Okay. So why is it? Yeah. So I was telling you what it looks like. So it's a bit like a cylindrical battery with a plus and a minus poles. And when you look inside, it's actually like a rolled sandwich of electrodes which conduct the current and some separators that prevent the short circuiting. So now, how does it work? If you look a bit closer, so you have these 2 carbon electrodes, and then you have something in between, which is an electrolyte, which is actually just a solution with ions. And when you plug the device to an external circuit, when you charge, what happens is that you have a charge building up on the electrode, which is compensated by the ions adsorbing at the surface of the electrode. So there is no chemical reaction, and this is why it's so fast, and also why you can charge and discharge so many times. What kind of carbon do we use at the moment? Actually, a lot of them are coming from natural precursors. So, for example, a coconut shell that you heat at high temperature with an acid, and by doing that, you create some holes, some porosity where the ions can adsorb. And the carbon that you're using and its structure, it's very important to get more or less energy. So you have to choose carefully the carbon. And so if we want to get more energy, or if we want to know if we can get more energy, we have to understand how they work. And so now we are getting close to what I do, because so it's challenging to do that, because if you want to get more energy, you have to maybe try a lot of carbons, and you can try to do that experimentally or in computations. And in all cases, you have to understand how it works and predict the energy that you can store. And it's not easy, because the holes or the pores that I was talking about, they are of the size of close to 1 nanometer, which is 1 million times less than a millimeter. So this is not something you can see by eye, obviously, and also not something you can see through microscopy. So you could use other experimental techniques, but the carbons that we use are usually disordered, and the other experimental techniques are usually better for ordered materials like crystals. So you can't really use those. So one of the techniques that you can use is to do molecular simulation. So in that case, you really take porous carbon electrodes that you put in contact with an electrolyte, and you basically try to predict the motions of all the ions in the electrolyte in contact with the carbon. So this is very powerful because you get an accurate description of the system and an accurate prediction of the capacity or the energy that you can store, but it's too long. It's very computationally expensive. So there is no way you can use that to predict the energy stored in many different carbons. So this is where the project comes in now. So what we want to do in SuperPOR is to develop a multi-scale model that will use some information from this molecular simulation, but will be much faster to study supercapacitors and perform an extensive screening of carbons for energy storage. If we do that, then we should be able to screen a lot of carbons and propose new design principles for electrode materials. And then because we can do that fast, we can also predict other properties, not only the energy that you can store, and some properties that could be interesting to characterize better the structure of the disordered porous carbons. And this is interesting as well, maybe even more, because these disordered porous carbons, they're used in many applications, for example, gas storage or filtration or desalination. And so, and their properties are usually linked to how they look at the atomic scale, and it's hard to define. So what have we done so far? So now we are like halfway through the project, and each time I'm gonna see you, like show you the people that work on this project, because obviously I'm not doing that on my own. So what Hassan and Michel did was to do molecular simulation. So this long simulation on a very big number of systems, 70. This was not done before. So this was a very systematic study with specific structures. And here, this was very important because it allowed us to extract key trends that we can then use as information to put in what we call a lattice model, because it's put on kind of a cube that includes some of this information. So this is what Anwar was working on, and together we developed a lattice model, which is 10,000 times faster than molecular simulations. And so it's obviously faster than experiments. Because for experiments, you need to prepare materials and so on, whereas these ones you can actually do on a laptop if you want. And the other advantage is that the way it is built, you can study systems that are 1,000 times larger than what you can do in molecular simulation. So I'm not going to lie to you, it's less accurate than the molecular simulation, but it's accurate enough to find, again, key trends that you observe experimentally, and so probably accurate enough to do the screening that we are now working on doing. In parallel, we have worked on the other part, which is the determination of the carbon structure. And to give you an idea of how challenging this is, here you have three spectra in black in the middle, which are obtained from nuclear magnetic resonance. And these are three different carbons. And if you look at it at first sight, you think, oh, this is exactly the same. Well, actually, there are small differences, but to be able to understand and to interpret these differences, you have to do another type of simulations where you look at how the electrons flow in the system. And actually, what you need to do is to combine results from these experiments with results of other experiments in order to be able to get a more accurate picture of what the structure looks like at the atomic scale. And at the moment, it's mostly done with separate measurements and not combined. And this is what we are working on, especially with Anaga at the moment, to combine these kind of results. So with this, I want to acknowledge the following people, which are either working directly with me or through collaboration. Obviously, the ERC funding, without which this wouldn't be possible. And as someone doing a lot of computations, I'm also very thankful for the High Performance Computing Center that allows us to do that. So the CalMIP in Toulouse and also the TGCC near Paris. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you so much. This is super interesting as well. We'll have the occasion to talk a little bit more about this and about the challenges that are associated with this kind of research. Now it's time for the panel session. So let's bring our three speakers together. Actually, they are together because of this virtual setting. I'd like to start up the panel discussion by asking, for instance, Ioannis, there's a moment we don't hear from you. What was, for instance, the most important moment in your career that allowed you to be where you are today? Tough question.
It's a tough question, yes. I would start by saying I didn't plan my career, and in any way. So I moved between academia to industry, international organization. I was working at CERN, for example, then decided to go back to academia. It was kind of a billiard for me, my career. But I would say that, you just need to be guided by your intuition and love what you do and be passionate about what you do, and then let the rest, guide you. It's as simple as that, actually. And enjoy, because we've lost joy in life, and we see the working environment as something that, doesn't necessarily bring happiness, but that doesn't need to be the case, really. Find something that you like and just go for it.
I love it. I love the perspective on intuition, the role of intuition in career choosing and in paths. Thank you. Anna, do you want to pile on this, or do you agree, or do you have a more structured approach?
No, I just realized it was the same for me. I never thought on this before, but it is true. I didn't plan my career, but for me, I think it was a critical point when I could put together what I did during my PhD and what I did during my postdoc, the PhD in Seville, the postdoc in Switzerland. And then when I could put both things together, for me it was a completely different and new world. And I think this is the most important point in my career, when I could start thinking about having my own topic within a very big group. Yeah, but I agree with Ioannis. You need to be happy about what you are doing, of course.
What about you, Celine? Not about the happiness topic, which I would say is consensual. About the role of intuition and not planning too much. The role of serendipity, perhaps. Let things happen. What do you think?
Well, yeah, so I also didn't plan to be where I am now when I was young. So I wanted to be a vet at the beginning, and then I realized that actually biology maybe was not so much the thing I wanted to do. And then I started to like chemistry more. And I think in my case, there are two moments that kind of decided where I am today. And one of the moments was when I met my PhD supervisor. So I was still doing my chemistry school, and I started this internship with him, which was 3 weeks, and this was molecular simulations for chemistry. And I knew I liked programming, and this was like combining the two things I liked the most, like doing physical chemistry but on a computer. So then at this point, I really realized, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. And at the end of the internship, he said, well, if you want to do a PhD in 2 years, then we can try to find a way to do that. So this was very important. And the other thing I want to mention also, because this is about ERC, this session. So when I started to think about writing an ERC, it actually came from my PhD supervisor at the beginning. He told me, maybe you should think about it, And one day I was in the car with my postdoc supervisor, Claire Gray from Cambridge, and we were coming back from a conference in Oxford, and we were the two of us in the car. And I really respect her. And I decided, okay, I'm going to ask her what's her opinion on me trying to do an ERC. And I thought she would say, oh, you're too young, just, wait or something. And then she told me, oh, I think it's a good idea. Yeah, you should try. And this was, like, for me, this was, and I think it's important, like when you go into that, also when you have the right people around you, and also sometimes who like push you a bit at the right times, because sometimes this is something we have difficulties to do, because I like how Ioannis said, we have to see what we can do, but also what we want to do. And this is really how I looked at the ERC. I thought, okay, what are the questions in the field I'm in, and what can I do, but what do I want to do? And this, yeah, so I really think if you want to stay, like to do things in academia or in research in general, you really have to stay in what your ideas are and follow up on that. So yeah, I guess that's my two critical points.
That's very interesting. Thank you. I find it's very interesting that you described that moment when it was really at the beginning of your career, right? The defining moment that you had when you were a student, right? So I think the lesson here could be that you know, inspiring students is extremely important, right? Perhaps young researchers are already too old. It's a joke. I also find fascinating the way you explain the situation in the car, right? It can be a moment like that, right? It's a very simple moment. And I'd like to ask another question to build on this. Is there actually a good moment to apply for a starting grant? I'm not talking a moment in your careers, right? I'm not talking about age or anything, about your, perhaps the maturity level of your ideas, or where you stand when you're a postdoc. Is there a moment that you would define as clearly the moment to go ahead and do it?
I can answer this question.
Yes, Ioannis, please.
Yeah, obviously you have to have a very well worked out idea. You need to have an idea that you have developed very thoroughly. Otherwise, it won't survive the test of the peer reviewing. When I received the reviews for my RC, I think I had more than 11. So you need to impress more than 11 really highly qualified experts. At the same time, I wouldn't discourage anyone from applying, because one mistake that people sometimes make is that they wait until they have, I don't know, the first Nature paper in order to apply for an ERC grant. This is for me a critical mistake. I didn't have any at the time of application. And all it matters is an idea. If you have a great idea, then just go for it whenever that may be, and just work really, really hard. And this is something that we didn't touch upon in you know, the previous discussion, that everything comes really through hard work. Of course, we're enjoying what we're doing, but you know, for the young researchers, you know, it's not a secret. We would happily put 12 or 14 hours of work every day, including our weekends and holidays, in order to reach to the point that we are today.
Do you have any insights on this, Martin? You have perhaps seen a lot of awardees.
It's true. There is a lot of people who, when they're thinking of applying for a starting grant, they look at the window of 2 to 7 years and think, I should wait until the end of that window because then I'm going to be more competitive. What is interesting is when we look at the statistics, there's actually no difference in success rate at all from people between 2 and 7 years. It doesn't matter where you are in the window. The success rate is more or less identical. So don't feel that you have to wait, as Ioannis says, until you have the Nature paper. When you think you have a mature idea, you're probably ready. Don't wait until the last minute.
That's super interesting. The point on statistics is very interesting indeed. Anna, I noticed that in your talk at the very beginning, you outlined a little bit a method to go about writing a starting grant.
Sorry, I did that. Yes, it was mine.
Can you comment a little bit more on this? Perhaps you have a more structured approach to share with us.
I think this is because for me it was very hard to get an ERC grant. So I went twice to the interview and I got it in the last chance. And I think it was because I didn't realize about what Ioannis has said somehow, that you have to convince people coming from very different topics. For this, maybe it is good that you explain directly to them what you want to do. It's not only that you go to your method that is very nice, completely pioneer and so on, but they need to see which is the real impact beyond your ERC project. And the impact in my case is not really only on the methodology, it's on, of course, on the application, on the final application. So I changed the project from the methods to the application, and it was much more successful.
That was a clever move, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, very interesting tip. I understand as well that the part where you present your grant to the jury is extremely short.
It's 5 minutes in my case.
It's 5 minutes. Can you please tell us how do you prepare for such an important thing? I mean, these people are going to give you a lot of money. You are going to work for a big amount of time and do many things during 5 years. And it's worth a 5 minutes presentation talk. How do you do that?
Well, in my case, it was 5 minutes, and I have to be honest and invest more time in these 5 minutes than for my PhD dissertation. And I have 3 kids. The oldest was 8 years ago, and she could say the presentation by heart. So I repeat the presentation so many times at home, walking with them, that they could reproduce my presentation. So this is something that you have to be really prepared, and you have to share not only with your kids, of course, also with their colleagues, with people who have been already in front of the panel, and you have to be very open to receive the tips from other colleagues. And this is very important, I think.
Preparation is the key to success. Thank you, Anna. And that's extensive preparation for those 5 minutes. Any of you guys, Celine, Ioannis, you have other views on this?
Well, no, I joined this. So for me, it was 10 minutes, but then some time for questions. And I think really the 2 parts are very important, because you get questions after on your proposal. And in my case, actually, the CNRS helps to prepare this. So you have to do a mock interview 1 month in advance, which is really good, because as scientists, sometimes we tend to try to do research as much as we can, and then we prepare the talks a bit late. So this was very nice to have this in advance. And when you do that, you do that. So in my case, it was a panel of other ERC, like people that were applying to ERC. And then you get a lot of feedback. So it's very important. And you realize at this point how difficult this is to get the message across, because the people are not from the field. So you really have to train how to explain to people what are the questions and why you think you can answer. And then I think the questions part, I think I could have been more prepared, because so even during this mock interview, they were saying questions, and I think you should really prepare them a bit like when you answer review to a paper, in a way, like you should really have really ideas of what you want to answer, because you have like 16 people in front of you, or like between 15 and 20, and everybody has a question usually. So you really have to answer as many as possible to not get someone frustrated. And this is a very difficult exercise. Mm-hmm. So yeah, preparation is important.
Ioannis, do you have any experience on this as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I endorse everything that Anna and Celine said. And I would like to add on that one needs to leverage and reach out to the network for assistance and help, in the sense that, you have a colleague in a different department, ask them to invest 5 minutes or 10 minutes of their time, give the presentation to them, see their reaction, and then go to a different colleague, organize mock panels, go to your mother or your father. They're not experts, but as my colleague said, a lot of the people in the room are not directly experts in your field. And so they understand as much as your mom and dad. Do they resonate with what you're saying? And the technology that you're proposing resonates with them? Do you think that it will have any impact on their lives? Do they get it? And again, subject yourself to scrutiny, continuous scrutiny, and from your peers and your colleagues.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that, Ioannis. I'd like to ask Martin for last remarks on this final ERC oral presentation before we jump to questions and answers from the audience. Questions are coming already.
I think that the final remarks I'd say is that although we have 3 talks today which are in broadly similar areas, you can see that any area of research, any idea that you have, is something which could be an ERC grant. And so to the younger researchers in the audience, and we saw there were many PhD students and postdocs here in the audience, I'd really encourage you to think about what is that idea, the idea that you've been thinking about for a long time, that maybe this could be the subject for the future. Try. Put in the application, try. Even if you're not successful at first time, as we've heard, not all of our grantees were successful the first time they get it. You get great feedback, and it allows you to develop that idea and become the researcher that you want in the future. So certainly I would encourage you all to try to apply and put in your ideas.
All right, thank you, Martin. Now we'll jump to question and answer session. We have, well, 15 minutes. The session ends at past 10. I have already a question here from Kerr Schumacher. He's a project manager at Jülich. He asks, how to find a good balance between marketing and scientific excellence? Is it better to have one big project or a portfolio from your point of view? And then it's a third-part question. Third part, how broad should be the research focus? Do you want to take these, Anna, perhaps? Do you have any idea? About
okay, yeah, about
marketing scientific excellence?
Yes, I'm going to start in the last question. I think you need to show focus. You cannot, okay, this is a very ambitious project, of course, but it has to be realistic within the high-risk, high-gain format. But if you try to apply this in too many dispersed activities, it's not convincing at all. So you need to be focused. And about marketing and excellence, I think the excellence is the most important point. And then you need to be able to share what you are looking for. And this is the part of the marketing. But without excellence, marketing is nothing, I think.
All right. Ioannis, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely agree. What I would also add is, on the broadness of the project, it depends on the, let's call it the TRL, right? So most of the ERC grants in particular sit at a very low TRL. And for this project, it probably makes more sense, to have a sole researcher building their own team, de-risking the technology, as we heard from previous talks. And at a later stage, when you start developing the technology and you're looking into more industrial processes, scaling up and so on, this is the time when you start broadening the team, bringing in industrial collaborators, and make the project, I guess, broader in this sense.
Thank you. For those in the audience who don't know what TRL is, it's technology readiness level. Yeah, it's a measure, it's a scale that measures the maturity of a piece of research. Yeah, low TRL means basic research, and high TRL means very close to applications.
Serge, can I just comment on that question, if I may, just in terms of the balance between the content and the marketing, as the question said. And I think Anna is completely right. The focus really needs to be on the excellence. Remember the audience that you're directing your proposal to. They are top researchers who act as our peer reviewers from anywhere in the world. They're interested in hearing about your science. They're not interested as much in hearing the marketing. And it's the idea and the way in which you're going to put that idea into reality that's the most important. So often we see that peer reviewers can be irritated sometimes by language that people use in their proposals which oversell or overmarket. They would much rather see the content and the interesting ideas that you're putting forward rather than a glossy image in terms of how you can market this better. So really think about your audience.
I also thought that in Anna's talk, something that was very interesting is how she related her background to the project, in particular in terms of project feasibility. I thought that was very, very clever. Is it something that people usually do, you think, Martin?
Yes, in a way. Of course, the idea with with the ERC grants is they can be great ideas which are completely groundbreaking, which could take people in a completely new direction. And so showing the story of the researcher, how your background gives the peer reviewer the confidence that although maybe you have had training in a particular area, you can. I think the sound went a little strange there. I'm sorry if you heard an echo. If you have a background in a particular area, you can still move into this new one. So telling your story of who you are, how you got there, and also where you want to be is really important. But don't think that you can't move into new areas. Just give the peer reviewers the confidence that you've thought about it. You see where you get the tools, the methodology, the skills, the know-how, the equipment to allow you to do that.
Martin, while we're at it, I have a question here from someone in Germany. How high is the chance to get an ERC grant? Let's say a starting grant. Okay, everyone gets focused on success rates. And to be the honest answer, the success rate for starting grants is about 11 to 12%. But remember, one of the things which we do in the ERC is we want to make sure that we allow the peer reviewers who are reviewing the proposals to really look at the best of them. And so we actually ask when you submit an ERC proposal that you submit it in two different parts. So you submit a short version of your proposal, about a 5-page summary version, a standalone proposal. And then at the same time, you submit the full version. In the first stage of the evaluation, the peer reviewers only look at the short summary version. They don't even access or have access to the long version of the proposal. And they will shortlist those proposals and take forward to the step 2 evaluation as many as 3 times that they can fund. So 3 times the budgetary value that they can fund. So it means that the really good ideas, and that's the ones you want to focus on and people in the audience should be focusing on, means that you got through to step 2. And there you have at least a 1 in 3 chance of being funded. And there, when you go to step 2, as a starting grant or a consolidated grant applicant, and also new in Horizon Europe as an advanced grant applicant as well, you have the opportunity to also explain and defend your proposal in an interview, as we've heard about. So I wouldn't get too focused on the success rates. The success rates are what they are. They're similar to funding organizations anywhere around the world. But really think about the type of application and be very excited if you get through to the step 2, because then you've got a 1 in 3 chance of being funded. Fantastic. Thank you. Very useful tip indeed. I'd like, there's another question here, and it's about mobility. The question says, do you have to switch locations a lot for a good scientific career? What do you think about this, Celine?
I think it depends a bit what you're doing and if you want to practice different skills. So in France, we are a bit pushed to do it anyway. So if you do a PhD in France, you are expected to move to a lab somewhere else before being able to come back if you want to come back, which personally, I think it's good in terms of seeing how different places work and also learning a new project. So I usually advise young people working around me that when they do a postdoc after their PhD, they should go to a project where they learn something new, either a new field and using maybe the same technique, or either a new technique but staying in the same field, which is actually a bit easier, I think, because usually when you enter a field, there is so much background that it's very difficult. And I think this is very important. And then the mobility after, I think it depends, because some people use experimental equipment that is not available in many places. So in this case, I think they're going to have to stay, and it takes time to build up your equipment and what you can do. In cases like me, for example, when you work on computers, actually I use supercomputers which are in different places, so I could move. But in a way, this depends a bit. So for me, for example, it was very important to find a place where I can stay, because somehow it's disturbing for me to think that I have to move again in 2 years. So it was actually preventing me a bit from thinking about the science. So I think it depends. Whereas I know a lot of people who are very excited about going to different places. Like they actually collaborate better doing this. Whereas I can collaborate quite well with visits of 1 week or 2 weeks in different places, but being based in the same place. So I think it's quite a personal thing. I think it's good at the beginning of the career to do at least to change at least once the place to see that it can be different. And then it's a bit up to you to see what your work allows and what you want to do personally.
Okay, thank you. Celine has spent 4 years in the UK, right?
4 years.
4 years. Ioannis, do you agree with this? What's your approach?
Yes, absolutely. So without necessarily being a requirement, I would say, to people that they need to expose themselves to different stimulants, new experiences. As Celine said, move across disciplines, because interdisciplinarity and cross-disciplinarity is actually one of the requirements of ERC. And so you have to have exposure of multiple fields, and that maybe pushes your chances from the mere 10-11% that Martin mentioned to maybe 11.5%, but even this 0.5% is important. So yeah, move not only geographically. I mean, it was a big move for me when I went from the UK to Switzerland, because I had a brilliant project manager and I learned the Swiss project managing point of view, which was very helpful. I never been able to follow because I'm Greek, obviously. I can't have the precision and the patience of a Swiss, but it was quite eye-opening. It's not only scientifically, but you gain so much by moving geographically. And again, mobility is not only geography; is moving from one field to the other, or within a field. If you are, we have someone in my group, for example. He's he was doing computational modeling. He's now moving into experiments, and that has been tremendously helpful for him and for our group.
Okay, thank you, Ioannis. I see that Martin hesitated when Ioannis said that multidisciplinarity was a requirement.
It's actually not, no. So you did see my hesitation. I mean, of course, many proposals which are breaking new ground will be multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary, but it's certainly not a requirement. I just want to comment on the mobility question. For us in the ERC, it's not a requirement at all. We actually have grantees who've never changed institution from when they started their PhD up to when they're getting their grant. But I agree fully with what Celine and Ioannis have said. It's more the international exposure that's important. So it's not a requirement to have mobility, but certainly taking on new knowledge, which could be through having collaboration, through going to conferences, being involved in other international consortia. All of these types of things give you the international exposure and lead you to experience new ideas and new approaches. And as Ioannis said, also maybe new disciplines, because that's certainly the ground, the fertile ground for bringing up the new ideas for the future. So it's not a requirement for us in the ERC, but of course, international exposure is something which is really will help all of you.
I have one last question here about, and I think this is related to what Anna said about having kids and having to prep for an ERC starting grant. How do you manage private life and a scientific career?
Well, I am not crazy yet, but I don't know if I will finish this year with my head in a good situation. I have to admit, because this year it has been terrible, because of this pandemic situation, I've been locked down with my kids during 4 months, and this has been very hard. But in my case, I have to say that I am very, very lucky, because since I am a tenure scientist, I can have some flexibility in my times. I can take care of my kids and take care of my research life, and so far it has been compatible. For me, I think it was incredibly nice to be able to apply for an ERC grant with the delay because of the maternity leaves. Otherwise, it couldn't be possible for me, of course. So I'm very happy to say that.
What about you, Celine?
Well, yeah, so I think that we all quite passionate. So I would say that for me, what's important is to keep times that are mine. So I do quite a lot of sport, for example, and even if I get very stressed about like my work, or if I really want to finish something, somehow there are times in my week that are where it's sport and that's it. And I really need that. So I think it comes a bit to that, like you have, it's not a bad idea to think what you can allow yourself to do or not, like to take time to decide what you want to keep as a balance, that you decide that you have times that are that, and it's okay. Like we put a lot of hours even without thinking about it. But if you decide that, like for me, this is what works. Again, I think it's something personal, but for me, what works is that there are given times in the week where this is a given thing, and my work is not preventing me from doing that. And this is what makes my life more balanced.
All right, thanks a lot. Listen, we have to wrap up now. We are at the end of the session. I'd like to finish by thanking you all. It has been very interesting working with you guys and with Martin as well as a co-moderator. Perhaps you want to say a few closing words, Martin.
I would just like to join you in thanking the speakers. So they've taken some time out from their very busy schedules, given us an insight into what it means, not just in terms of being one of the scientists which are changing the future direction of research and all of our lives, but also what it means in terms of their career, how they got where they were, and also how they manage within their personal lives in terms of their work-life balance. So I'd really like to thank all of them for this personal insight into their worlds. And I think it was a real privilege listening to all of you. Thank you very much.
It was indeed a privilege. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.